They were sensational. The old lady got shot, though, so that they were brought into this friend of ours, Sarah Gorby, who raises all those wild, lost things.
Lee Marvin lived a remarkable life and passed away as a great man. Yet, not many people know him beyond what they saw on screen. Beyond his movie roles and military career, many stories that shaped the man he became remain hidden and almost unbelievable. But what are these stories? And why do so many find them hard to believe? Join us as we uncover shocking stories about Lee Marvin that few people know. The blue blood rebel who couldn't be tamed. Lee Marvin was born into a family where almost everyone expected him to grow into a respected gentleman. He came into the world in New York City on February 19, 1924, as Lamont Waltman Marvin Jr., but he would later become known simply as Lee Marvin. Looking at his family background, nobody would have guessed the kind of life he would live. His father, Lamont S. Marvin, was a successful advertising executive who headed the New York and New England Apple Institute. His mother, Courtney Washington Davidge, worked as a fashion writer and beauty consultant. Through his mother's family, Lee was related to Confederate General Robert E. Lee, the man he was named after. He was also a distant relative of George Washington. Everything about his family suggested discipline, education, and success. But there was much more to his life that remained a secret to many. Lee Marvin had completely different ideas. School was never a place where he felt comfortable. Years later, biographer Dwayne Epstein suggested that Lee may have had undiagnosed attention deficit disorder and dyslexia. At the time, nobody understood those conditions, so most people simply believed he was lazy or impossible to control. Lee was sent from one boarding school to another, including Manomet School, Pauling School, and Peekskill Military Academy. Almost every school ended the same way. He was expelled for fighting, smoking, and skipping classes. Lee later claimed he had been thrown out of 15 schools. One story even said he tossed a classmate out of a second-floor window. His mother hoped stricter discipline would change him, so he was eventually sent to St. Leo College Preparatory School in Florida. Surprisingly, it was not the school that changed him. It was the wilderness around it. Whenever he had the chance, Lee disappeared into the Everglades to hunt deer, wild turkey, bobwhite quail, and other game. He learned patience, silence, and accuracy. He could spend hours tracking animals without making a sound. Those skills later helped him survive some of the toughest fighting in World War II. Even more surprising, that battlefield experience would eventually turn the rebellious boy into one of Hollywood's toughest and most respected stars. That part of Lee Marvin's life was incredible enough on its own, yet another hidden story made his journey even more fascinating. 21 beaches under fire. The moment Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Lee Marvin knew his life was about to change. At the time, he was only 17 years old and still struggling through classes at St. Leo College Preparatory School in Florida. School had never meant much to him, but this time, it mattered for one reason. He knew the United States Marine Corps would not accept him unless he finished. For perhaps the first and only time in his life, Lee stayed focused long enough to qualify. On August 12, 1942, shortly after turning 18, he enlisted in the Marines despite his father's objections. After completing his training, Marvin joined I Company, 3rd Battalion, 24th Marines, 4th Marine Division. He qualified as a scout sniper, one of the most dangerous jobs in the military. It was a job that required courage and pinpoint accuracy, qualities Lee Marvin possessed in abundance. Before long, he found himself fighting in the Pacific, where every island became a deadly battlefield. The Japanese military had heavily fortified many of these islands. Every landing became a fight for survival. Marines had to leave their landing craft and run straight into machine gun fire and hidden bunkers. There were no safe places to hide, and many soldiers never made it off the beach. Lee Marvin took part in an astonishing 21 amphibious assaults during the war. That number alone sounds almost impossible to believe. He landed on beaches at places such as Roy Namur, in Kwajalein Atoll, Eniwetok, and Saipan, where some of the Pacific War's fiercest battles took place. Many Marines considered themselves fortunate if they survived just one landing. Marvin kept returning to the front again and again, somehow escaping death each time. Although he made his mark during this fight, another chapter of Marvin's military journey would later reveal a side of him that few people knew existed. The machine gun burst that changed everything. Lee Marvin survived landing after landing during World War II, but the battle that changed his life forever came on the island of Saipan. By June 1944, American forces were fighting to capture the island from Japanese troops, and some of the hardest fighting took place around Mount Tapachau. Lee's unit was pushing forward with the rest of the 4th Marine Division when everything suddenly fell apart. Enemy machine guns opened fire across the line, catching the Marines in the open. Within seconds, men began falling all around him. Lee was among those hit. A machine gun bullet tore through his body and severely damaged his sciatic nerve, one of the largest nerves in the human body. The injury was so serious that many believed he would never walk properly again. Almost at the same time, an enemy sniper's bullet struck his foot, making the situation even worse. His company suffered terrible losses during that attack, and many of the Marines who charged beside him never made it home. The battle ended for Lee Marvin on that bloody hillside, but another fight was just beginning. He spent more than a year moving between military hospitals where doctors performed several operations and guided him through painful rehabilitation. They warned him that he would live with a permanent limp. Lee refused to accept that prediction. Day after day, he pushed himself until he learned how to hide the damage well enough that most people never noticed it. Even after becoming a Hollywood star, the pain never truly disappeared. Every confident step audiences saw on screen came from a man whose injuries never fully healed. For his service, Marvin received the Purple Heart, along with several military decorations, including the Presidential Unit Citation, the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, the American Campaign Medal, and the World War II Victory Medal. He never tried to make war sound exciting. Instead, he spoke honestly about the fear every soldier carried into battle. He once admitted he was scared to death. In another interview, he bluntly said he got shot and sent home. That honesty earned him respect, but the scars of war followed him home, leading to another sad chapter of his life that remained hidden from the public. The plumber who accidentally became an actor. When World War II ended, Lee Marvin returned home carrying far more than his military medals. Like many veterans, he struggled to find his place in civilian life. He had little formal education, no clear career, and no idea what came next. While some former soldiers became businessmen or returned to school, Lee drifted back to Woodstock, New York, hoping to earn an honest living any way he could. His first job had nothing to do with movies. He worked as a plumber's assistant at a local community theater, spending his days repairing pipes. Acting was the last thing on his mind. Then, something happened that completely changed his life. During rehearsals for a Red Cross benefit production of 10 Nights in a Bar Room in 1946, one of the actors suddenly became ill. The production needed someone to fill the role immediately. Lee happened to be nearby, so someone asked if he could step in. With almost no preparation, the former Marine walked onto the stage. To everyone's surprise, including his own, he looked completely at home. The audience believed him, and the people running the theater saw something special. Biographer Dwayne Epstein later wrote that acting gave Lee a way to express the emotions he had been carrying since the war. It did not erase his painful memories, but it gave him a purpose he had been missing. That unexpected opportunity led to a summer job with the Maverick Theater in 1947, where he earned only $7 a week. Later, he used his GI Bill to study at the American Theater Wing in New York. Small television roles followed before he made his film debut in You're in the Navy Now, alongside Charles Bronson. Directors quickly realized Lee brought something few actors could offer. He had lived through real combat, so every movement felt believable. Ironically, the man who walked into a theater to repair plumbing walked out with a career that Hollywood never saw coming. But his biggest breakthrough was still waiting just around the corner. The most terrifying villain John Ford ever filmed. The moment Lee Marvin appeared on screen, audiences believed they were looking at a man who had already lived through things most people could not imagine. That feeling became one of his greatest strengths during the early years of his Hollywood career, when directors kept casting him as ruthless criminals and violent gangsters. One performance after another proved that Marvin could make even simple scenes feel tense. In The Big Heat, released in 1953, he played the vicious gangster Vince Stone. The film contained one moment that audiences never forgot. During a heated confrontation, his character threw a pot of boiling coffee into the face of Gloria Graham's character. The scene was shocking for its time, and many moviegoers left the cinema talking about it. That same year, he appeared alongside Marlon Brando in The Wild One. Marvin played Chino, the leader of a rival motorcycle gang. While Brando's Johnny Strabler became the film's biggest star, Marvin easily held his own whenever the two men shared the screen. His rough appearance and fearless attitude made him look like someone who belonged in that dangerous world. Still, the role that truly defined his reputation came almost 10 years later. In 1962, legendary director John Ford cast him as Liberty Valance in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Standing beside Hollywood giants John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart was never easy, yet Marvin never looked intimidated. Instead, he became the man everyone remembered. Liberty Valance was cruel and completely unpredictable. Every time he appeared, the tension inside the story immediately rose. John Wayne admired Marvin's performance so much that he later wanted him in Donovan's Reef. Actor James Coburn also spoke about Marvin's presence, saying people naturally became more serious whenever he walked onto a film set. There was something about him that could not be taught in acting school. Perhaps that was because Marvin had already faced real danger long before he faced a movie camera. But as convincing as Lee Marvin was as Hollywood's toughest villain, the next chapter of his life proved he was far more than the bad guy. In fact, one unexpected role changed everything and turned him into one of the biggest stars in American cinema. Let's find out about it. He won the Oscar playing a drunk and gave half to a horse. Nobody expected Lee Marvin to become one of Hollywood's biggest stars, especially after spending years playing ruthless villains. Yet, one movie changed everything. That movie was Cat Ballou, released in 1965, and it gave audiences a side of Lee Marvin they had never seen before. The film starred Jane Fonda, but it was Marvin who completely stole the show. Before production began, the role had actually been offered to Kirk Douglas. His agent advised him to reject it because he believed the part was too small to matter. Douglas later admitted in his 2007 memoir that turning it down was a huge mistake. Lee Marvin accepted the role instead, and it became the biggest success of his career. Marvin played two completely different characters in the film. One was Kid Shalene, an aging gunslinger who spent most of his time drunk and could barely stay on his horse. The other was Tim Strawn, a ruthless outlaw with a silver nose. Moving between comedy and serious drama in the same film was not easy, but Marvin made it look natural. Audiences could not stop laughing as Kid Shalene stumbled through scenes. One of the funniest moments showed him swaying beside a horse that looked just as drunk as he did. The movie was filmed in only 32 days with a modest budget, and very few people believed it would become a major hit. Instead, Cat Ballou earned more than $20 million across North America, making it one of the highest-grossing films of 1965. Marvin's performance earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor, a Golden Globe, and a BAFTA. When he walked onto the Oscar stage, he kept his speech short, but one sentence became legendary. Smiling at the audience, he joked that half of the award probably belonged to a horse somewhere out in the San Fernando Valley. The crowd burst into laughter, and the line went on to become one of the most memorable Oscar acceptance remarks ever made. Winning an Oscar made Lee Marvin one of Hollywood's biggest names, but behind the success was a personal life that became even more surprising. The man who couldn't sing knocked the Beatles off #1. Very few people expected Lee Marvin to make music, and even fewer believed he could produce a hit song. After all, he was famous for playing hard men on screen, not for singing. Yet one unexpected performance turned him into one of the most unlikely chart toppers in music history. The surprise came when Marvin starred alongside Clint Eastwood in Paint Your Wagon, a musical western released in 1969. The film was based on the Broadway production by Alan J. Lerner and Frederick Loewy. Casting Marvin and Eastwood in a musical seemed like a strange decision because both actors were known for westerns and war films, not for singing. The movie reportedly cost around $20 million to make, but it failed to perform well at the American box office. Even so, something remarkable happened after the film reached audiences. One of Marvin's songs, "Wand'rin' Star," was released as a single in the United Kingdom. Marvin knew he was not a trained singer, but he refused to let someone else record the song for him. Every note the audience heard was his own voice. People had mixed reactions to his singing. Actress Jeanne Seberg once joked that his voice sounded like rain gurgling down a rusty pipe. Marvin heard the criticism, but he never tried to sound polished. He believed the song worked because it felt honest. Then came the biggest shock of all. In March 1970, Wandering Star climbed to #1 on the UK singles chart and stayed there for 3 weeks. It also reached #1 in Ireland and entered the top 10 in Australia. Even more surprising, it kept Let It Be by the Beatles from reaching the top spot in Britain during that time. A man who admitted he could hardly sing had outsold the biggest band in the world. Marvin never released another major hit, making him one of music's most unexpected one-hit wonders. But if that story sounds unbelievable, wait until you hear how his private life became the center of one of Hollywood's most famous courtroom battles. The trial that changed American law. Lee Marvin probably never imagined that one relationship would make legal history. Yet after his romance with actress and singer Michelle Triola ended, their courtroom battle created a legal decision that would affect many similar cases in the future. Everything began in 1965, when Marvin started a relationship with singer and actress Michelle Triola. The couple lived together for about 5 years, but they never married. When their relationship ended in 1970, Triola made a decision that shocked both Hollywood and the legal world. She even changed her surname to Marvin before taking him to court. Triola claimed that Lee Marvin had promised to support her for the rest of her life. According to her, she had given up her own singing career so she could stay with him and support his lifestyle. She also alleged that she became pregnant 3 times during their relationship. She said Marvin paid for 2 abortions, while another pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. The case, known as Marvin versus Marvin, eventually reached the California Supreme Court in 1976. Newspapers across the country followed every development because no unmarried couple had ever fought such a legal battle on this scale. The court ruled that unmarried couples could make legally enforceable agreements about financial support and property even without getting married. Soon after, the media began using a new word for such claims: palimony. Although the legal ruling was groundbreaking, Triola did not receive half of Marvin's fortune. After the case returned to the trial court, she was awarded about $14,000 in rehabilitation payments in 1979. Even so, the decision became one of the most important family law cases in American history. By the time the legal battle was unfolding, Lee Marvin had already started a new chapter. In October 1970, he married Pamela Feely, a woman he had known since childhood, and they remained together for the rest of his life. Hollywood's hardest drinker and the fight with the lumberjacks. Lee Marvin's reputation became so famous that directors, actors, and film crews all had stories about the amount of alcohol he could consume in a single day. Marvin never tried to hide it either. In a 1973 interview, he openly admitted his struggle with alcohol, saying that he had been drunk for most of his adult life. Beer was his favorite drink, but that was only part of it. He often followed each beer with a shot of vodka, sometimes beginning early in the morning. Director Joshua Logan, who worked with him on Paint Your Wagon, claimed Marvin could drink an entire case of beer during filming. On the set of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, John Wayne reportedly had to carry him back to his trailer after he passed out between scenes. His drinking also caused serious problems at work. During the filming of The Professionals in 1966, actor Burt Lancaster became so angry over Marvin's behavior that he nearly threw him off a mountain during an argument. Director Richard Brooks had to step in before the confrontation became even worse. Even with incidents like these, Marvin somehow managed to keep working and remained one of Hollywood's most respected actors. One story, however, sounded almost impossible to believe. While filming in Oregon, Marvin walked into a local bar and got into a fight with an entire group of lumberjacks. Not just one man, but several of them at once. Witnesses later said the fight continued until state police arrived to break it up. The following morning, Marvin appeared on set covered in bruises. He refused medical treatment, never complained, and went straight back to work as though nothing had happened. Director Samuel Fuller believed Marvin's experiences during World War II shaped the way he lived. He said Marvin could discuss great writers like Ernest Hemingway one minute and explain military combat techniques the next. Eventually, his drinking caught up with him. After doctors showed him the condition of his liver in 1977, Marvin stopped drinking completely. He never entered a rehabilitation program and never returned to alcohol. But the story wasn't over yet, because the final years of his life brought a farewell that shocked Hollywood. The headstone that doesn't mention a single movie. After giving up alcohol in 1977, Marvin continued acting, although he accepted fewer leading roles. He reunited with Charles Bronson in Death Hunt in 1981, and critics praised the chemistry between the two veterans. He also appeared in Samuel Fuller's The Big Red One, a war film based on Fuller's own experiences during World War II. Marvin often said it was one of the finest films he had ever made because it showed war as it truly was, instead of turning it into entertainment. That honesty stayed with him throughout his life. Although The Dirty Dozen became one of his biggest commercial successes, Marvin admitted he never liked the film because it did not reflect the reality of combat. Having survived some of the bloodiest fighting in the Pacific, he spoke openly against war and later criticized America's involvement in Vietnam. His final movie was The Delta Force, alongside Chuck Norris, in 1986. By then, his health had begun to fail. He developed valley fever, a serious fungal infection, and complications from treatment left him even weaker. On August 29, 1987, Lee Marvin died of a heart attack at his home in Tucson, Arizona, with his wife Pamela by his side. He was 63 years old. Because of his military service, Marvin received a full military funeral and was buried at Arlington National Cemetery near the tomb of the unknown soldier. Looking back, it almost feels unbelievable that one man could live so many different lives. He was a rebellious schoolboy, a decorated Marine, a feared screen villain, an Oscar-winning actor, a chart-topping singer, and the man whose court case changed American law. Hollywood remembered him as a star, but Lee Marvin chose to be remembered first as a Marine. That simple headstone tells his story better than any movie ever could. Which of Lee Marvin's stories shocked you the most? Share your opinions with us in the comments section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen, and you will enjoy it.